Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, back with another one of my power ranking analysis videos here in the preseason of Spring Split 2022. And this time it's one I'm actually very excited to talk about, and that is going to be NA Academy that I am going over today. I know a lot of you probably don't watch Academy, but I watch Academy, I watch Amateur as well, and this is a really interesting year for Academy, and one that I really do want to go over on this channel. Hopefully, I can introduce a lot of you guys to some of the newer players in Academy, get you guys excited for the season that is upcoming. Obviously, what with lock-in being so early and, some players not being over yet, we've actually had a chance to see some of these Academy teams playing. In Golden Guardian's case, we've had, quite a few chances to see them play already this year. So we've got a little bit of tape on them preseason-wise, and I'm here to go over how I think those Academy rosters will shape up for the Academy split, and then obviously going into the Proving Grounds circuit as well. If you guys are excited, please go ahead and leave a like. It really would tell me that you guys are interested in Academy content and more of that. If you guys haven't checked out any of my other power ranking videos for the LEC, the LCK, and the LPL, I'm going to link those in the iCard in the top right now, so you can go ahead and check those out if you are interested. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. The way I do this series is I'm going to be going over all 10 Academy teams from 10th to 1st in terms of my power rankings. So it's going to be going, from who I believe will be the worst Academy team all the way up to who I personally believe will be the best Academy team. Now, even bigger caveat than normal here. I put this in every single one of my videos, but this is especially applicable to this video. The rankings are going to be kind of up and down because these players, while, we do have a grasp on them, we do kind of know how they are. The whole point of Academy is to see these players grow and to see them get better. And so there is a very probable chance, more so than any other region, that the way I power rank teams in this video is not going to be how people ended the year. But, what's the fun in that? Let's talk about where these teams are kind of expecting to get, maybe in terms of their projections, and then, my opinions on the rosters constructed. But without further ado, let's jump into our first team, the team that I have as the 10th ranked Academy team, and that is going to be Dignitas Academy coming in here. Now, I'll quickly explain what you are seeing on screen if you are new. In the top left corner, you're going to see a power ranking number. That's going to be where I personally power rank them, 1 to 10. In the top right, you are going to see a consensus power ranking. Usually, I will pull this from my Discord. I didn't have enough people respond to the Discord, so I took public opinion. I, kind of scoured the internet for Academy power rankings and just kind of made a consensus ranking myself of those public opinions in the top right. You're also going to see all 5 players on the team listed there with a number next to their name. That number is where I personally power rank them within their position. Now, the caveat here, especially for Academy, is that number is going to be how I view their performance right now going into Spring 2022. Which you could argue for Academy is the least important aspect, is how good they are at the moment. But I didn't feel it would be fair to rank them based on where I saw their upside. Like usual, I think a player can have a low number, or a high number, I guess, whatever you want to say, in this category. As long as you're not just going based off the number, if you listen to how I talk, I can kind of still hype them up as an exciting prospect to watch. So, as usual, I would very much recommend that you don't just arbitrarily take the number and yell at me in the comments section about, oh, X person is too low, and, not really bring up any of the points that I have to say. I think you can be a lower-ranked player and still have a lot of good upside, and I could still see a world in which you could finish as a high-ranked player. So, with that being said, all the, mumbo-jumbo out of the way, let's go ahead and start talking about Dignitas Academy. So, their roster from top to support is looking like Eclipse in the top lane, XU in the jungle, Darkwings in the mid lane, and then Spawn and JJ returning here as the bot lane. This is just, to me, the lowest budget, kind of most experimental, I would say, of the Academy teams. And I think that could be a good thing. You're bringing in 3 players from Amateur this year and then returning 2 from your Academy team last year. We can talk about Spawn and JJ since they are the ones that are returning. Spawn's kind of your exciting prospect out of the two. JJ's obviously more of your veteran here. He's going to be ranked a little bit higher because you know what you're going to get out of JJ, but, you know, he's not going to be growing too much at this point. He's been in the league long enough that we kind of know what we're getting. I will say, with regards to kind of the main roster and whether or not call-ups could happen, that is something I'll touch on in cases where I think it is applicable. And this one, I think it might be. Because Biofrost is someone we haven't seen in an entire year, and JJ has proven to be at least a competent Academy support, someone who has played at the LCS level in the past, and, you know, if this bot lane could really start working at the beginning of the year, in Biofrost, you know, and Neo weren't good at all, I could definitely see this bot lane kind of jumping up to LCS. But, you know, JJ kind of being that veteran support, not really growing much. Spawn was brought in last year to be one of your big projects. And he was fine. I would almost go as far as to say he was a little underrated last year. He is not, you know, a super duper flashy, hard carry level bot laner. That's not his playstyle. He's much more of the consistent, you know, will kind of farm it out and team fight, bot laner. This bot lane didn't get a lot of action in lane, and I think, you know, that can maybe be a little bit difficult to praise, especially in Academy, because you want to stand out in Academy, and they didn't. I will say with bot laners, there is basically from 1 to 10 in Academy is this group of really good young bot laners that somebody's going to break out and we just don't know who it's going to be. So you have Spawn here ranked at 8 just because that's basically, in my opinion, the likelihood of him breaking out. It's not to say that his upside is that much less or that he even at the moment is that much worse than the 7 people above him. Bot lane in particular is a very difficult position to grade here, and he just unfortunately falls for me a little bit lower, but those are going to be your returning members, and then you're bringing up 3 people from amateur last year. I really want to talk about Darkwings, because he was one of the better amateur mids last year in 2021, and I was actually really excited to see him get a shot here in Academy. Mid lane is another position where Academy is pretty stacked, so he falls a little bit lower, but he really was fantastic in amateur last year and absolutely deserved his call up here to Academy. Hopefully he can progress and become one of the more talked about mid laners. I really liked what I saw out of him last year. XU is another really exciting player, I would say. His champion pool is a little bit low. Obviously he's known for the Graves, which is a good thing. You know, Graves is pretty consistently playable throughout most metas. So if you're going to be good at that champion, you know, you might as well, if you're going to be good at a champion, you might as well be good at one that's going to be pickable a lot. But we've actually seen a little bit of XU, more so than the rest of them this year already, because he is filling in for River on the in the lock-in tournament. And he's been okay. Obviously going from amateur to lock-in is a big jump, but he's honestly held his own a little bit. I have some belief that XU is going to be pretty decent this year. I think he shows good solid mechanics and a good understanding of the game. I think the transition will be relatively easy here. If him and Darkwings can really become a nice duo, I could see both of them actually getting some decent looks next year for LCS if this team like way overperforms. The more unknown aspect of this team is going to be Eclipse in the top lane for me. I don't really, I've seen, some TSM amateur games from last year, but Eclipse never really stood out. We don't have a ton of games from TSM amateur and from Eclipse in general, so it's going to be interesting to see how good he is. He was kind of a surprise to me because obviously we know that top lane's kind of a barren position in terms of Academy and amateur in North America, but I just didn't have Eclipse pegged for someone who would be kind of an Academy candidate, and he comes in here, obviously starting for Dignitas Academy, so it'll be interesting to see how he adapts. Overall, I think there are upside pieces on this team. I really do like Darkwings. Spawn, is consistent, if not flashy, and I think XU could have a really good year, but overall, I think right now I would project this team to be one of the worst teams in Academy just based off their performance. You're bringing up 3 amateur players, and really when you're looking at the skill of this team is probably more similar, I would say, to one of the top amateur teams, whether you're talking about like EG Prodigies or Immortals AoE, or even like 100 Next. I'd say they're more similar to that than they are to like the top Academy teams. And that, that's fine. Obviously, Academy's not always about winning, it's about growing. So if you feel like you've got some players that you can grow here and can maybe progress in your system and challenge for spots on the LCS roster later, then that's good. So that's really the goal. So overall, Dignitas, not super looking forward to them winning, but they do have some pieces I'm interested in. Moving on to my 9th ranked team in my Academy power rankings here, and the team that comes in 9th for me is going to be FlyQuest Academy here. Some interesting pieces, but overall I'm a little, I don't want to say underwhelmed, but just a little interested in the direction that they're going. Their roster from top to support is looking like Philip in the top lane, Yuji in the jungle, Spirax in the mid lane, Tomo and Diamond returning here as your bot lane as well. The reason this team comes in 9th and not 10th for me is almost entirely based on the bot lane, who showed last year that they are fringe level LCS. They've played in the LCS and looked fine. Diamond especially, I think, is still a little bit underrated. I think he maybe got a bad rap last year, but I think he's still a good player. I still have him as the best support in Academy, at least right now. Obviously, I think that very much could change, but I think going into this year, I still think Diamond's probably the best support in Academy. And Tomo's a pretty good AD carry as well. I think both of them prove that they can play in LCS and be pretty good. That's the reason that this team, for me, comes in 9th and not 10th over Dignitas. But the top side of the map, I am a little bit interested in. You're bringing Philip back here in the top lane, which I do like consistency. I do like when if you find a player that you really like, that you stick with them and you keep, developing them and you kind of put them on the path to success. Top lane is a, potential position of weakness for this team in LCS this year, so I'm just a little bit concerned about Philip. He was very raw last year when he came in summer. He was not so good in Academy last year, and obviously, players grow. That's the whole point of Academy, but what we saw out of Philip last year was not super great, and so it'll be interesting to see if he's improved a lot going into 2022. Fingers crossed he has. But you are bringing in two quote-unquote collegiate players here as your mid-jungle duo, which I do find interesting. First, you're bringing in Spirax, who I'm a little bit more familiar with. He's played a lot more in amateur and academy, in amateur and collegiate. He's coming in here. He was fine last year. As opposed to someone like Darkwings, who I just talked about for Dignitas. He played an amateur and he was good. I wouldn't say he was great. That's not to say that I don't see why FlyQuest picked him up. He definitely has upside, and, can be, I believe that he could turn into a decent Academy mid here, but I don't think he's necessarily ready right now. He was not one of the best amateur mids last year. He was just a good amateur mid last year, so he'll have to take a big improvement if he wants to compete with Academy level mids on a consistent level basis. And then you're bringing in the big surprise here, which is Yuji in the jungle, which is someone that there's almost, he almost has no tape of him on the line. I really like, his games are almost non-existent. He's played a little bit of collegiate, and that is it. And so, obviously, FlyQuest liked what they saw when they did their, they probably did a scouting, like open call or whatever they ended up doing. They obviously liked what they saw with Yuji coming in here. And he's really the big, quote-unquote, upside of this team, right? Because we know so little about him as a jungler. If this team is going to overperform and actually be closer to a contender this year than they are to kind of a bottom-tier, more amateur-level team, I think it's going to be because Yuji is kind of a surprise to a lot of people, because we really just don't have that much tape on him. So, it's hard for me to give a true grade here, because he's coming in, kind of similar to someone like Dior, coming in the LEC, but even less tape. At least with Dior, we got like a major tournament out of him. Yuji, we really have almost nothing outside of just a little bit of collegiate. So, it'll be interesting to see how he adapts to the academy level, basically skipping amateur altogether. So, overall, I have this team coming in 9th because while the bot side of the map I think is consistent and they're fine and they're okay, I'm not sold at all on the top side. Philip had a rough last year. Spirax wasn't even that great in amateur, and then Yuji is basically just a complete unknown. So the top side is a pretty huge question mark to me. I'm not so sure about the process here. Philip sticking around, yeah, if you want to keep your guy, that's fine. There were better amateur mids, in my opinion, that didn't get picked up, and Spirax is kind of left on the wayside. And then you have Yuji, who is, obviously their process was internal, because we've seen almost nothing about him in tournament scenes and, everything like that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to this FlyQuest Academy team going into 2022. But like I said, if the upside is going to be there with Yuji coming in, and then obviously this bot lane being very, very consistent. Could this team, theoretically make playoffs and, be a proving grounds kind of sleeper team? Maybe. I'm just not necessarily going to predict that. I think they're going to be on the lower end of Academy teams. Moving on to number 8 in my power rankings going into 2022. And my number 8 team for Academy is going to be a little bit of a surprise here, and that's going to be Evil Geniuses Academy here, coming in at 8. Their lineup from top to support is looking like Surdy in the top lane, Tomio in the jungle, Saligo in the mid lane, Kaori at AD carry, and then Skytech at support. An interesting roster here. You're bringing up 3 members that were kind of a part of that EG Prodigy team last year. One of them, Antonio, obviously played for Academy last year, at least a little bit of time. But, overall, I would say 3 members that were kind of signed to be part of your EG Prodigies team coming up here. And then 2 more veteran carries in Saligo and Kaori who have had a little bit more time to play at a higher level. I think prospect-wise, if you want to point out, like, who would be the most exciting in terms of upside and potential, because this team does have quite a bit of players that you could consider that, you have to start with Tomio in the jungle. He is, by all accounts, a very, very strong prospect. And one of the big reasons I think a lot of people are really excited about him is, from what I've seen, just how vocal and versatile and how much of a team player and team leader he has really become in the past year. And I think that's, when you hear that out of an academy or an amateur jungler, I think you get really excited, because that's one of the hardest traits, I think, to really develop, because team play is really kind of, it's not something you can just practice, right? I mean, I guess theoretically you can, but not the same way that you can practice, a lot of the mechanical skill that you need to play League of Legends. I think playing in a team environment and being comfortable with that is something that, kind of comes with time. And I think if Tomio is going to, have that, and that's something that we can consider a positive for him, that could be really good. You're bringing in Saligo here, who obviously I have been very vocal on this channel, as I think he should have an LCS spot. I think he played well in LCS last year for Dignitas. And the fact that he's kind of being replaced here, I think, is a little bit sad, but he goes back to being one of the better Academy mids here, like he was in summer last year. And that's fine. Evil Geniuses obviously see that Saligo is a really, really strong mid laner for the Academy level. They bring him in to be a little bit of a rock here, and also, theoretically, to be a little bit of cover for Jojo Pune, who is going up to the LCS roster and has no experience playing at that level. If he is just not ready, if the call-up was too soon, and you really need to have somebody that can step in and play at an LCS level to, kind of at least contend decently, Saligo can definitely be that guy who can come in and play at least a little bit more consistently than someone like Jojo if he does start to struggle. You're, of course, also bringing Kaori in here in the bot lane from Supermassive. I'm not as familiar or in love with Kaori. I think he's fine. But he's also someone who I think has some stuff to show me. Maybe more so than some other AD carries in the region. Another import AD carry this year, Violet, is someone who I'm just a little bit more sold on. And I think that would tell you kind of Kaori is just someone who I still think is kind of growing in a way. And I think, while he's a veteran of, the Turkish League and, he's coming in here to be more of a veteran on this team, I do think that he is someone who, as a veteran, can potentially grow, and we can see, maybe be one of the better Academy AD carries by the end of the split. But let's talk about the 2 more raw prospects here. Let's talk with Surdy in the top lane, talk about him first. Surdy is a really mechanically talented player, and he really, really likes to show it. He's very much the skill check kind of top laner, and I think that's a good thing in Academy. I think Academy, you want to show off your mechanical and your just skill, your skill in general, right? Your mechanical, your mental, everything. The point of Academy is to get people's attention in LCS so that you can get that promotion and to grow and to get better and to show that you can work together with the team. I think Surdy is in a really good position to do that. Not only is he in one of the better organizations in all of LCS for developing talent and Evil Geniuses, if not the best. You can argue them in 100 Thieves, whatever you want to say there. But his playstyle, I think, is very conducive to flashy plays. He's very much a skill checker in the top lane, a very, very mechanically talented player. I'm really interested to see how he's going to stack up against some of the more experienced Academy top laners. Players like Dokla, players like Viper. You know, players like Gamsu, even Darshan, these players that have a lot more experience. It's going to be interesting to see how he stacks up on a regular basis against them. But obviously, I liked what I saw out of Surdy last year. And I hope that he can kind of continue that momentum into 2022. Skytech is coming in here as the support. Skytech's a little bit more on the unknown. I would say he was a good support last year, but I wouldn't say that he was exceptional. The support pool is pretty limited in North America. Support and top are kind of the two positions that I would say are the most in need of some good prospects. And me having Skytech at 10 doesn't mean that I believe he will finish the season at 10. I very much don't believe that. I believe EG is probably going to outshine this 8th power ranking, because they have the infrastructure to be better than this. And obviously, if they're coming through their system, I trust their staff a lot, and they clearly like these guys that are coming up. It's just a lot of turnover for me to rank them higher, but I think Skytech, could get better. He wasn't exceptional last year, kind of, in the same vein of what I said about Shenyi kind of coming into TSM. He makes good plays, he makes bad plays, but he doesn't always make, exceptional plays. And I think that that's fine. Obviously, you can be taught to make more flashy plays, but even if you don't, there are players on this, enough, Surdy and Tomio on the top side are going to be trying to make flashy plays, are going to try to be making flashing plays. So, sorry if my English is faltering me at the moment, but Skytech overall, I think is, obviously they see something in him, and I think he will probably outperform this 10th place ranking. Overall, I have them at 8th. The consensus has them at 7th. Neither of us really have EG as one of those teams that's really going to be contending for proving grounds, but, could things change up? I mean, yeah, absolutely. Tomio could really come into his own, so we know Saligo's going to be solid. Kaori could be really solid, and then if Surdy and Skytech can come in and really, capture that potential, this team could be one of the better academy teams. They have one of the better systems and staff rooms, and if they really did that, I wouldn't put it past him. I wouldn't be surprised, but just, there's too many question marks here for me to rank them higher than 8th going into the season, at least. Moving on to the final team that I have projected to miss playoffs going into 2022, but obviously in Academy, anything could change. Coming in at number 7 is going to be Team SoloMid TSM Academy. They have some pieces here that I'm obviously really interested in. They're retaining pretty much the entire roster from last year, except for a few pieces. So let's talk about what they have. Top to support is going to be Viper in the top lane, Hyper in the jungle, Takeover in the mid lane, Instinct coming in at AD carry, and then Yursan at support. An interesting team here. Kind of similar to the one they had last year, but in a good way. Because they kept some of the more interesting players, most notably Takeover, here in the mid lane. I'm actually pretty high on Takeover. I think he could be a really, really solid mid if he kind of cleans up his act a little bit. He's very much the risk-reward kind of mid laner. He will make those big, flashy plays because he's so mechanically skillful that he really can pull it off. But sometimes those can be disastrous plays that can really ruin his laning phase and can kind of set him behind. So I think if he can get a little bit more consistent in the types of decisions that he makes, he's so mechanically skillful. I very much expect him to be one of the better Academy mids this year, just like he was last year overall, even if he does have some lower lows, maybe than some of the other top Academy mids. The other player you're obviously really excited about here is going to be Yursan here, coming in the support position. Yursan is also really, really interesting because he's really, really solid, especially on his engaged champions. The Alistar especially comes to mind. The Nautilus comes to mind as picks that Yursan in the past has really shown that he can be a very, very dangerous player on, and one of the better ones in Academy overall. But it's just outside of that I'm a little bit worried, in the same way that Takeover, I think, kind of has to play those more aggressive picks and champions, because he's going to make those plays that try to take those leads, and, if he can't pull them off, he can set himself behind. I think Yursan on things that aren't super proactive, he can be a little bit passive in general, and I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, the meta does still favor engage supports, I think, for the most part, but if he can grow into a more versatile support player who's a little bit more comfortable on these more enchanter, more passive picks, I think he could absolutely be someone to watch as an LCS candidate going into next year. Obviously, you have Viper here in the top lane. I don't really want to talk too much about Viper. We know what Viper is. He is a good top laner who's going to take risks and is going to, you know, skill check you in lane and try to fight you, and that's fine. You know, he's the veteran, the quote-unquote veteran of this team, and he's going to play as such. He's probably going to be getting a lot of the resources early. Top side especially will probably be getting a lot of the resources pretty much all year long with Takeover and Viper there. And, you know, hopefully he can help the younger players grow here. In the jungle position, I think you have an interesting player in Hyper coming back here. Hyper is someone who he's shown things that I really, really like, but overall, I would have to consider him more of a mid-range prospect in general. I'm not sure if he has, like, starting full-time LCS potential, but I think he is maybe a little bit underrated by the Academy community. I actually like what I see out of Hyper for the most part. I know he comes in 8th here, but really when you're talking about the rankings at positions at this point, it's you're digging through with a fine-tooth comb to find things to put them down for, just because they're all pretty similar level prospects, or at least players at the moment. I think Hyper might be someone who he's someone who I can see having a breakout year going into this year, and maybe getting a little bit more attention when it comes to LCS going into 2023. I think obviously the hype around Hyper isn't, you know, pun not intended actually, isn't super high right now, and I don't think most people are expecting a huge season out of him. But I think maybe I could see a world in which he absolutely outpaces those expectations and is maybe more of a, you know, higher tier Academy jungler than maybe people give him credit for. The final person to talk about is going to be Instinct here in the bottom lane, and he's an interesting prospect. I know I have him ranked 10th here, and that might feel a little disrespectful, but like I said, 1 to 10 for Academy bot laners. I mean, you could really flip a coin, honestly, like, and one of them is probably going to emerge as, you know, a really good LCS candidate, and, you know, I just don't think that's going to be Instinct. You know, I think maybe skill-wise, he's probably at the bottom, but even more so playstyle-wise, he's for sure going to get the least amount of looks of any of these, like, contender AD carry bot laners, mostly because he's probably going to be playing weak side for the entire year. Like I said, Takeover and Viper are going to be getting a lot of resources topside, but even Instinct traditionally has been a weak side bot laner, and weak side bot laners in Academy just traditionally don't get a lot of looks. Look at Spawn last year for Dignitas. It's just kind of hard to stand out if you're not the one that is actively taking over the game. Pun not intended again there for Takeover. But, you know, Instinct at 10, could he be the 3rd or 4th best Academy AD? Absolutely. He absolutely could. I have him at 10 here just because I think playstyle-wise and what we've seen from Instinct, he comes in a little bit lower than the rest, but I don't think him being 10 is nearly as bad as maybe it would seem on the surface. Overall, TSM Academy comes in at 7, just outside of playoffs for me. Exactly where they were last year in both splits. The consensus has them a little lower at 8th. I'm a little bit higher on this team, maybe just because I'm a little bit higher on Takeover, Yursan, and Hyper as a trio. I think they have a lot of interesting pieces there. Viper, I think, is a pretty decent, you know, piece, and then Instinct is, you know, while he's a weak side AD carry, I think he's a very stable AD carry, and I think this team will probably outperform expectations in that regard, but I still don't think they'll outperform it enough to make it into playoffs. Moving on to the team that I have power ranked 6th, a team that I think is going to surprise a lot of people with how low they are. And I might look like an idiot for this by the end of the year, just because historically this would be a bad take, but coming in 6th for me is going to be Cloud9 Academy here, probably a lot lower than a lot of people are expecting, and I'll kind of talk about why I think that in just a little bit, but let's talk about their roster from top to support. They have Darshan in the top lane, Malice coming in the jungle, Copy in the mid lane, King or Sven. Sven obviously is kind of the Academy AD carry here, but King is the one that has to play because he's not an import. And then I believe it's going to be Isles here in Academy. It could be Winsome as well, but I believe Winsome's going to be playing for the main team as far as I'm aware. So Isles here in Academy. It's a really, really talented team on paper. And really on paper, there's almost no reason why they should finish 6th. And I agree with that. They should be an upper level team in LCS, or in Academy. But one of the reasons that I'm a little bit more concerned is kind of the verbiage that this team has taken in regards to its Academy team going into next year, which is essentially saying that they're using the Academy games really as just more scrims. They don't really care about Academy. They don't really care about winning Academy. They have an Academy team, and they're investing in an Academy team pretty much specifically for internal scrims. And that could be a good and a bad thing. It could be a good thing for the LCS team, but it could be a bad thing for this Academy team here in terms of their performance in the kind of proving ground circuit in general, because I could definitely see this team getting less resources, quote unquote, less attention in terms of focusing on winning games in Academy and in the proving ground circuit. I could see this team maybe that not being their priority and them kind of not caring too much about it overall, which is kind of why I have them a little bit lower here. Obviously, I'm not internal. I don't know exactly what's going to be happening with Cloud9, but I'm just a little bit concerned about the verbiage used surrounding Academy. Let's talk about the players, though. This is a very veteran team. This is arguably, maybe other than TL, like the most veteran team in Academy, at least when it comes to players that have played on the stage before. All 5 players have played on a similar level stage to this in the past, and I don't think you can say that about many Academy teams going into this year. Obviously, 4 of these players were on this Academy team last year, and then you're bringing in Malice here in the jungle, one of LS's guys. He's going to be basically part player, part coach, as far as I'm aware. Obviously, he's still going to be a good jungler. I have him at 9th just because, again, like I say, everything's kind of coin flippy around here, and he hasn't played in a little bit. I'm a little bit more certain on some other players, but he's going to kind of be here to transition a little bit easier into the LS style, which he is very, very familiar with here. So, you're bringing back Darshan in the top lane. He, to me, is the best Academy top laner. He was last year. He's very solid. He can play carries. He can play tanks. He can play whatever you want. He's a very, very consistently great Academy top laner. He's one of the 7 to 8 best top laners in North America. LCS teams, I get why they don't want to give him a shot, but he's probably a top 10 top laner, and he has been, very, very good in Academy for a little while now. You're bringing back Copy here in the mid lane. He's really the only player on this team that I think you could consider an actual prospect, like someone they're actually developing. He was fine last year. I don't think he's very close to LCS. He definitely showed a lot of room for improvement last year for Cloud9. And, hopefully LS can kind of get the best out of him, and this coaching staff can get the best out of him. But he was not on that LCS level for me last year. He's going to be the scrim partner for Fudge, and I'm a little bit worried about, just how that room will develop overall. But, Copy is really the only person here you can consider a prospect, so if you're a Cloud9 fan, you're kind of hoping he develops. The bot lane here is pretty established in Academy. King and Isles played a lot of last year together here in Academy, and we're good. Everybody knows that I'm pretty high on King. If this were Sven in the slot, they would be ranked number 1, but obviously Sven is doing the internal scrims, and as far as I'm aware, is not going to be playing in Academy or Improving Grounds, so I do have King listed here. Isles is also listed here. I believe he is going to be the one that is playing in Academy. He could very well be playing in LCS. I'm just not sure who he's going to be playing between Winsome and Isles. And as far as I'm aware, Winsome is the one that is going to be playing in LCS. Isles will be playing most of the games in Academy here. So, yeah, this team has upside to win Academy, to be one of the better Proving Grounds teams, to, win Proving Grounds, all that kind of stuff. But I'm just not entirely sold on the environment that is capable of, I don't think they really care about winning Academy or winning Proving Grounds. And so I'm not necessarily believing that they're going to be as, structured in that as their main goal. Even if it is, there are still some concerns. I think Copy in the mid lane is a big question mark for this team. I think Malice in the jungle is just someone we haven't seen in a while. And obviously, you can say what you want about the skill level of Malice. Malice is definitely Academy level, but, we haven't seen him in a while. I think the rest of the team is really good, but pretending like this team doesn't have flaws, even if they were going all in, is just not true. So overall, they come in at number 6 for me. Consensus has them much higher at number 3 as one of the upper level Academy teams here. I completely agree. I completely understand why people would say that, because, you know, Darshan, King, or Sven, Isles, and Winsome, these are going to be some of the best players in Academy, just period, full stop. But they do have some question marks, and the biggest one for me being, how much are they even going to put into the split in general? Moving on to number 5 in my power rankings for Academy. This is another one that is going to be a big shocker if the consensus is to be believed. And even just name-wise, you're going to be shocked to see them this low. But for me, coming in at number 5 is going to be 100 Thieves Academy. 100 Thieves Academy coming in here at 5, which I think is kind of a surprise. But I'll talk about why. You know, top to support here, you've got Gamsu in the top lane, Kenvi in the jungle, Jimmy in the mid lane, Wixie at AD carry, and then Busio here at support. Interesting pieces to this team. A lot of veterans on this team. The top side of this map is pretty much all quote-unquote veterans. People who, you know, while Kenvi is, you know, still a prospect and is still growing, not really someone who I would consider to be someone you're expecting to take a huge leap here in 2022, someone who kind of already has taken a huge leap. Let's talk about Kenvi. Kenvi's arguably the best player in Academy at this point. I definitely think you could make the argument for a few other players, but that's definitely the general consensus. He reportedly turned down a lot of bottom LCS team offers in order to come back to Academy and kind of prove that he deserves to be on one of the top tier organizations in LCS right now. Do I think he was that good in Academy last year? Maybe. I think he's definitely shown that he is this very, very high level prospect. Someone who has gotten a lot of hype coming through the system, coming through 100 next all the way up here. But I'm not, if you're just going off of what we saw in 2021, I don't think Kenvi is on the level of like one of the top 5 junglers in the LCS at the moment. He will need to be better if that is something that he really wants to accomplish. If he wants to join a team like 100 Thieves, or a team like maybe like EG or TSM or C9 or any of these other rosters, obviously their jungle situation notwithstanding, because he's not going to be on the same level as Spica and Blabber and Closer. But, you know, just in terms of if you want to get on a big organization like that, you kind of need to be one of the top 5 junglers in LCS. And I don't know if Kenvi proved that he was going to be that immediately in Academy last year. He'll need to kind of be exceptionally good if he wants to accomplish that goal going into next year. But the other kind of big interesting piece here for me is going to be Busio and Wixie, the bot lane. They are kind of the other developing pieces here. You bring back Busio here. He just signed a new contract. We really haven't seen a ton out of Busio, other than a little bit last year in Amateur. You know, obviously they like what they see. They have a phenomenal, you know, in the same way that I hyped up the EG coaching staff and the system that they have there, 100 Thieves has a very good eye for talent, and when they identify a player as someone that is worth keeping and worth promoting through their system, I definitely think that says a lot to me. And Busio is one of those people that they clearly see some good in, and they want to keep around, and they're kind of promoting to the Academy team this year. I believe he is going to be playing for the Academy team this year. They do have Sword as well, but I believe Sword will be playing for 100 next, and Busio will be playing for the Academy team. Obviously, those two could switch around, but if Sword is here, it's a similar spot. Sword obviously being someone who played mid lane for TSM for a while in Academy, but is now role swapping over to support, like every other 100 Thieves support. But Wixie coming in here as well. Another player who was kind of good in Amateur last year. I actually really liked what I saw out of Wixie last year. There's just a lot of really good AD players. It's tough to break out at that position, so, you know, like I've been saying over and over again, he comes in 9th here, but this bot lane definitely has some upside, and if they overperform their expectation, or at least the expectation that I have for them, this team is going to blow the number 5 power ranking out of the water. They're just kind of the part of the team that I'm a little bit less confident in, maybe more so than some of the other teams above them. But your top and your mid, your solo lanes are going to be your more veteran, your more experienced players. You bring in Jimmy in here in the mid lane. He is, you know, obviously he's coming in from PCS. He should be really, really good for Academy. PCS is a level above Academy. That, in my opinion, I think when you're talking about, you know, if you perform well in the PCS, you're probably too good for Academy. And Jimmy did perform well in the PCS. He very much could contest for the best Academy mid. But like I said, Academy mids are actually really, really good this year. And so unfortunately, Jimmy falls 6 for me. He could be number 1. He really is here to help them win and not as much develop, but you want to convince me that Jimmy is going to be number 1. I would believe that. I just want to see it in NA first with this group of people before I kind of put him as high as some of the other players. And then you have Gamsu here in the top lane. A more obvious stopgap you could not find. Gamsu is here as a really reliable top laner, someone who's going to be fine this year for 100 Thieves Academy, because next year Sniper comes in and is going to be taking that role. So, you know, Gamsu really is here for the leadership, the winning, the veteran kind of helping these players develop. Basically, he's just here to hold down the fort until Sniper is going to be available next year to play in Academy. He is the big prospect, obviously, in the top lane for 100 Thieves. So, overall, I have them 5th because I'm worried about the bot lane. And, you know, I think that alone is more... I have more questions about this bot lane than I do about pretty much anything in the top 4 teams. But if Kenvi really does go God mode this year and does prove that he could be one of the top, you know, 5 junglers in LCS right now, this team should shatter this 5th-place ranking. I think this is probably worst-case scenario for 100 Thieves, but either way, it's where they fall in terms of my system. So, consensus has them at number 1, and I get it. Kenvi's awesome. You know, Jimmy should be pretty good, and then they obviously like Busio a lot. Wixie showed some good things in Amateur. Gamsu is a proven top laner. I can see why, you know, this team wants to win Academy, but for me, I'm just a little bit more hesitant on them being able to do that immediately. But obviously, they absolutely have the pieces there to do it. It's all about whether they come together. Now we are going to move into the top 4 of my Academy teams, and coming in at number 4 for me is going to be CLG Academy, Counter Logic Gaming Academy, a team that finished really, really poorly last year in summer. They got much, much better this offseason in terms of infrastructure and development, even on the LCS level. I'm really, really happy with Counter Logic Gaming has done this offseason, but, you know, their Academy team is kind of a product of that. They brought in a lot of proven Academy talent, and for that, I will go ahead and praise them. Let's talk about who they brought in. They bring in Dokla in the top lane, Rosethorn in the jungle, Triple in the mid lane, Prismal at AD carry, and then Breezy at support. Pretty much everybody here is quote-unquote experienced in Academy, maybe with the exception of Rosethorn in the jungle, but even Rosethorn has had some time here in Academy. Everybody else is quite accustomed to this level of play. Let's talk about Rosethorn first, because he really is the big prospect on this team, the person that really has the most to gain. He showed up well last year. I remember he had a really good scouting grounds in 2021, and throughout 2021, he really grew. He was someone who I don't think was actually that good at the beginning of the year, and grew into a player, you know, week by week with progression that actually turned out to be one of the more consistent junglers in Academy by the end of the year. If he continues that kind of growth curve, I could definitely see him being an LCS option for a team in 2023, even, you know, 2022, summer, whatever you want to say. He's someone who has shown that he is steadily improving. And if he continues to do that, I could definitely see him getting LCS offers, which really is the goal here, and being one of the better Academy junglers in general. I think you have some top tier talent elsewhere as well. I have to talk about this bot lane because you bring in Prismal here. I have to talk about Prismal because the fact that Prismal doesn't have an LCS job at this point, I just don't know what else he can do to show off and really get an LCS job. He's been the best AD carry in Academy. I think other than Luger, there really hasn't been anyone that is even contestable with him. Ironically, he is behind Luger here. And while I think they are on a relatively similar level in my opinion, I know most other people will see Luger as a huge upgrade to Prismal and someone that, unfortunately, Prismal's just kind of stuck behind him. And that's unfortunate. If Prismal does kind of get stuck here in the Academy loop, I think that is a failure because Prismal is too good to be stuck in that loop. He's been too good for a while. In my opinion, he is the best AD carry left in Academy, and I think he will be that again this year. You have Breezy here at support. Breezy's a good Academy player. I don't think he's necessarily someone that's ever going to get a ton of LCS looks, but he's a really solid Academy player. He's, you know, a former Sun Devil, so I have to cheer for him. He is just good overall, I would say. He's not someone that I think is exceptionally great, But he's a versatile support. He can play Enchanters, he can play Engaged Champions. A little bit better on the Engaged Champions, but isn't everybody. He's just a good Academy support. Someone who I would consider to be fine. And then your solo laners here in Dokla and Triple. Dokla is just, you know, kind of similar to the other top tier LCS Academy, like top laners, you know, Darshan and Viper and Gamsu. He's a veteran that is just fine. Probably not getting a ton of LCS looks, but someone who is going to make your Academy team better because he is a solid player. He's one of the kind of bottom tier fringe, you know, LCS players. And that's good for CLG to have. You know, this team is kind of full of veterans, but having talent in the top lane is never a bad thing. You bring in Triple here in the mid lane as well. Triple is kind of in a similar space to Prismal for me, where he's kind of on the cusp of being LCS ready, but he's now behind Palafox, who I think is just kind of a better version of him. He was behind Palafox last year, and I think Palafox is just a better version of Triple. And I don't think Triple's going to be getting a lot of option here at CLG to really take over Palafox unless Palafox really disappoints. But Triple is a good Academy mid laner. I have him at 7th here, but like I said, you know, 7-1, you really, it's same with bot lane, it's very contestable. He is a really, really solid Academy mid, and having him that low isn't a detriment to him, it's more so just a benefit to how good Academy mids are in general. So, overall, CLG I think is going to be a really solid Academy team this year. They have a lot of veterans and experience on this team, but maybe not as much upside as some of the other teams outside of jungle. There really isn't a lot of, like, noticeable upside where their players can grow and get a ton better. A lot of the growing that these players have done is probably already done. So that's why I have them 4th. The consensus has them a little lower at 5th, but I think their floor is just a tad bit higher. Overall, again, a good team, if not one that is probably one of those really high floor, low ceiling kind of teams. As we move into the top 3 here, we get to some teams that I really do think could win the Proving Ground circuit going into 2022. Let's get to the first of those. Coming in at number 3 for me is going to be Immortals Academy. A team that really did improve a lot this offseason with some really interesting pickups, both in the prospect and in the veteran level development. So, going over the roster, they have Concept in the top lane, Chad in the jungle, Pretty in the mid lane, Arrow at AD carry, and Joey at support. Your returning 2 members here in Pretty and Joey, introducing a veteran that I'm so excited to see back in Academy in Arrow, and then bringing in 2 good youngsters here in Concept and Chad. Let's talk about the veterans first. You're bringing back Pretty here in the mid lane. He is a competitive mid laner. He was pretty good last year in Academy. I don't think he's exceptional, but I do think he is pretty good. When you're talking about, you know, whether or not he has LCS level potential, he's someone who I think could come in and be fine. Maybe on the same level that someone like Insanity was last year for this Immortals team in LCS, but I don't think he's going to be more than that. Although Immortals maybe thinks otherwise. From what I've heard internally, Immortals is very high on Pretty in general, and there's a big reason that he was kept around this offseason, so maybe there's just something I'm not seeing. I rank him a little bit higher than, like, Jimmy and, you know, Triple. I do like him, you know, and what we've seen from him. I just don't know if, I think, in my opinion, it seems like he has at least hit his ceiling. But then you look at the bot lane, which is definitely more experienced. 2 players that have been in the scene forever. Joey is returning here at support. Joey is Joey. He is going to be one of the better Academy supports until the day he dies. He's been in the 2nd tier of North America for what seems like 8 years at this point. And now I just believe that that is where he is going to spend the rest of his career, as one of the better supports in the 2nd tier of NA forever. And, you know, hopefully that's just what Joey is at this point. You bring in Arrow at AD carry, who isn't necessarily someone who I would consider to have a ton of upside, but I actually do think he helps his team out a lot, not only as a player, but as a leader, as someone who has a lot of experience being a coach last year, someone who can come in and help, you know, these couple young players develop. I just like Arrow. Arrow's an awesome presence. He's someone who's great for the North American scene. I'm just really happy to have Arrow back in Academy in general. But then we can get into the 2 young players that they bring in here in Concept and Chad. Let's talk about Chad first, because Chad has a little bit of time he's had a little bit of time in Academy here with the 100 Thieves Academy, but mostly played for 100 Next last year. Chad looked pretty good coming in for 100 Academy, and he looked very good for 100 Next. I actually project Chad to come in as one of the better junglers in Academy this year. He has a lot of potential for me to be, you know, I don't want to say like Kenvi level, but maybe just below that. There were a couple junglers last year that I really touted everybody to keep their eyes on as potential superstars in the making. Will for Dignitas Academy was one of them. He's taking the split off. Chad is another one that I think could really, really be a dangerously good jungler, even just right now. He's kind of been stuck behind Kenvi and hasn't gotten a ton of opportunity to play, but he could be a very, very solid jungler, and I'm actually projecting him to be a very, very good jungler at the Academy level. I would expect to see him in LCS in a couple of years, pretty much for sure. And then you have Concept in the top lane. I have him ranked pretty high here at 5th, and that is almost all on the back of kind of what I'm hearing internally from a lot of teams themselves. Concept, to me, didn't really stand out for a lot of 2021, but man, was he a desired player for Academy in 2022. Pretty much every single team that needed and, you know, that wanted a young Academy top laner was going after Concept this offseason, from what I hear, and Immortals is actually really lucky to land him. So, you know, a pretty good grab here for Immortals. He's got a bit to show me, but obviously there is a lot of hype surrounding Concept, and if he can turn out to be someone that can be kind of this hype young NA top laner, I know the NA top lane pool is pretty barren, and that might be why Concept was so desired as a top lane prospect that isn't terrible. But if he can turn out to be, you know, a pretty decent NA prospect at top lane, I could definitely see him kind of getting some LCS looks from teams, because top lane is just a position that it seems like everybody needs to upgrade at the LCS level. Overall, Immortals should be way better than people expect. I know the consensus has them at 4. I think that I would expect this team to pretty easily finish top 3, even if the other teams in the top 3 aren't the same. I think their floor is very high with players like Pretty, Joey, Arrow, even Chad. I think the floor of Chad, from what we've seen from him, is really high. But I think as opposed to a team like CLG that I've talked about that has a high floor and a low ceiling, I think this Immortals team kind of has a high floor and a high ceiling. Because if Chad and Concept can really turn into two of the better prospects at their positions in Academy, this team could win the Proving Ground circuit. Absolutely. And if you're Immortals, you're really, really excited about that, because I can't remember the last time Immortals really had a superstar development system, a superstar academy system here. And they've got two really good young players here in Concept and Chad that I think very much could make their LCS team in a couple of years if things aren't, if things don't work out at that level for the players that they have. So overall, very, very happy with what Immortals has done this offseason. I really like the roster they put together, and they really should be competitive. Moving on to number 2 in my power rankings, and by proxy, number 1. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at how high I rate this team, but I think we've gotten a little bit of a glimpse to see why I rate this team so highly already this year. Coming in at number 2 for me is going to be Golden Guardians Academy. A lot higher than the consensus, and for a couple reasons that I will explain why in a bit, but let's go over what their roster is looking like. It's looking like Tony Top in the top lane, Iconic in the jungle, Ryoma in the mid lane, Violet at AD carry, and then Chime at support. Some interesting players here, for sure. The big reason I'm really excited and really, really hopeful about this team, 4 out of the 5 players on this team have main region experience, and pretty high main region experience, might I say. Ryoma, obviously somebody who in the past has been on playoff teams in the LCS. He's gotten playoff experience. Iconic and Chime just played in LCS last year, and then Violet actually just came off of a Worlds run with Peace. So 4 out of the 5 players on this team have some pretty nice experience, and then you do have a more of a prospect, quote-unquote, in the top lane in Tony Top. Tony Top is a really interesting player. Like I said, he's kind of the prospect of this team, but he was a little bit inconsistent last year. He does like to play those split pushers, those, he likes to play Fiora. That's kind of the pick, at least I know him for. He's kind of an interesting prospect. If he can clean up some of the edges around his game, I think he could actually be a really good top laner. He shows a lot of really good things, but he can die a little bit too much, if I'm putting it bluntly. That's really just the big thing with him, though. If he can get a little bit more consistent with his play, I think that he really could be one of the better top laners in Academy as soon as this year. And everyone outside of him is already one of the best players in their role. Let's talk about the 2 Golden Guardians players from last year. We'll start with Iconic. Iconic was actually not that bad at the LCS level. I thought him and Blaze Olive actually had decent chemistry last year. It's a little bit interesting that they would keep these 2 players around while also not having them on the LCS level. You usually don't see a lot of players just actively take a demotion in the same organization, because if an org doesn't necessarily see you as a starting LCS player now, it's kind of hard, it's kind of hard for me to believe that they're going to see you as a starting LCS player in the future if their LCS staff and everybody that, you worked with up there has already kind of deemed you not ready for that. So, kind of an interesting move to see 2 players get demoted, but, Iconic's going to be one of the better Academy junglers for sure. I thought he was a little bit underrated in terms of just how he played last year. While he wasn't one of, the better LCS junglers or anything like that, I think he was better than maybe some people gave him credit for. I don't think he was necessarily a negative on a team that did, remember, make playoffs. Whether or not they were a good playoff team and whether or not I like the playoff system that allowed them to make playoffs is obviously up for debate, but, he was a part of the good of that team, which was topside. So, Chime, not so much in the support position. Him and 6A did not have chemistry in the bot lane. We even saw that in Lock-In when these 2 played recently. I know Chime gets a lot of flack online. He wasn't great last year, but he still is somebody that had, he does good things. He's not just some bad prospect that doesn't do a lot of good. He needs to work on his macro game. His laning is actually pretty solid, I would say. Maybe not for the LCS level, but for the Academy level, I think his laning is actually pretty solid. He needs to work on maybe some macro plays and not getting caught, but outside of that, I think he's going to be a very serviceable Academy support. You're pairing him up with Violet here, who is coming in from OS. After all the talent left, he absolutely stomped that region. He was easily the best AD carry in OS last year. But obviously, all of the OS AD carry talent is here in North America now. So, it's kind of interesting to see how good is he going to be at the Academy level. I think he's going to be pretty good. I would have a mind to believe that he is going to be one of the better Academy AD carries. I have his floor ranked just a tad bit higher than some of the other AD carries that I would consider pretty solid this year. But, he's going to be above all the prospects for me, essentially. I think he's going to be really, really solid as the AD carry. If him and Chime can develop a consistency in lane, I think that could be a real strong point of the map for the team, which is good because you also have a big strong point in the mid lane here in Ryoma. I'm talking about Ryoma last, but he very well might have been the best mid laner in Academy last year, or at least the most consistent. You could talk about JoJo being the best overall, the most hype at least, the biggest prospect. But Ryoma, I think consistency-wise, was probably the best mid in Academy last year, and I expect him to continue that. He was really, really solid. Someone who has a lot of LCS experience, is just kind of one of those players who's too good for Academy, but not good enough for the LCS. Kind of on that barrier, kind of in the same way that a player like Saligo is a little bit below him, in the ranking, at least for me. Always going to be one of the better, Darshan's another good example, always going to be one of the better Academy players, but is probably not going to get a ton of LCS looks just because he doesn't really have the upside to be anything more than a bottom tier LCS mid laner. But, when it comes to winning Academy, he offers you a lot because he is really mechanically talented and does a lot for your team macro-wise as well. So, do I think this Golden Guardians team is underrated? Absolutely, I do. Obviously, they have played more than any other team at the beginning of the season already, playing in, the first Proving Grounds Open Qualifier, and then obviously in Lock-In as well. They're going to be playing in Academy when Academy starts up next week. It's just incredible how much this team has already played. I think that will factor in terms of this team's probably going to have a little bit more synergy than other teams, at least in spring. I could see them jumping out to a pretty big lead in the Academy scene. So overall, I'm really, really excited about what Golden Guardians did for their Academy roster. While there may not be a ton of quote-unquote prospects on this team, maybe outside of Tony Top, and then potentially like Iconic and Violet are 2 players that I definitely could see at the LCS level. I think that this team is going to do really, really well when it comes to playing other Academy and amateur teams, and definitely could take Proving Grounds by the end of the year. Moving on to number 1 in my power rankings. It should be no surprise to those who have watched Academy over the past year or so. Number 1 for me coming into my power rankings is going to be Team Liquid Academy, TL Academy, the past 2 Academy World Champions coming in here. Their lineup is looking very similar. It is going to be Bradley coming in the top lane, Armeo in the jungle, Hyeri in the mid lane, Yeon at AD carry, and then Ayla at support. This is basically the same lineup that just won back-to-back Academy championships, but you're bringing in Bradley here, who was one of the more exciting mid laners in Amateur last year, one of the ones that I was really, really high on coming into this year. I was really, really hoping he would get an Academy spot, and he does, but it's actually role swapping here to the top lane. And I get that, honestly, a lot. Throughout the video, you've probably noticed I've talked about this a lot. I've talked about how mid lane is kind of a hard role to break into in the LCS or in an Academy. It's really hard to stand out. There's so many good Academy mid laners. And I've also talked throughout the video about how hard teams are searching to find good, young North American top lane talent. And so I could definitely see a world in which Bradley says, okay, I may not ever really get noticed enough to get an LCS spot in the mid lane, but in the top lane, if I can really prove myself on something like TL Academy, go win Proving Grounds, go win Academy, go win all these things, maybe I'll get some LCS looks. I could definitely see that. Now, is Bradley the kind of player that can, theoretically role swap to top pretty easily? Maybe. He's a very mechanically strong player. That's really the thing that stands out with Bradley. He likes those assassins. And so, when you're talking about whether that can translate to the top lane, maybe, aggressive picks like Camille, I could definitely see working for a player like Bradley. The thing I would worry the most is, especially last year, Bradley got a lot of jungle attention, a lot of resources thrown at his lane. Topside's not going to get that, and he's certainly not going to get that on this team. And so he might have to learn how to play weak side a little bit more successfully here. I'm not sure if that's just something that he might already have that in his wheelhouse. It's just something that we didn't have to see a lot from him last year because he played so much of strong side last year. Obviously, mid lane always being strong side, essentially. The other big prospect that I want to talk about on this team that I'm excited about is Yeon as the AD carry. We've seen a little bit out of him in lock-in so far, playing with Core JJ, and he's actually been pretty good. He looked really good last year. I was really impressed with what I saw from Yeon. It's why he's, for me, at the top of this clump of AD carry prospects, right? I've been talking about this clump all video long, but Yeon for me is the top of that clump of prospects that I think could really get some LCS looks. I think he looked really, really good last year, and I would expect him to continue that going into this year and maybe get some LCS looks going into next year. A lot of that is Ayla being really good as well. He's one of the top players at his position at support. He might not be playing for this Academy team early on. Ironically enough, it might be Core JJ because we don't know if Core is going to be getting his visa towards the beginning of the year. We don't know what the deal is with that yet. If he doesn't, Ayla will have to play, I believe, in LCS, and Core will be playing in Academy, which is terrifying in general. Yeah, if that happens, that's unbelievable. But, if you have Core JJ here, he's obviously the best support in Academy. But Ayla, even Ayla here is going to be one of the better supports in Academy. He's pretty close to just being LCS ready. I would expect both Yeon and Ayla to get some LCS looks going into 2023. Hyeri is another player who I think is really good at his position. He comes in 5th here for mid laners. Again, like I said, mid lane's just stacked. It's really hard to kind of break through. I say he's one of the better players at his position, and he comes in at 5th. So that's just how good mid lane is. Really consistent player, kind of similar to Yeon and Ayla in that respect. Very consistently good, and someone who, while he is good with resources, doesn't necessarily always need them. Armeo is Armeo. At this point, he kind of falls into that clump of, players who are probably too good for Academy, but just probably not good enough for LCS. Armeo probably falls into that category as well. One of the better Academy junglers, but just someone who is going to be more of a veteran presence on this team. Overall, this team should be the best team in Academy, in my opinion. The consensus doesn't agree. They have 100 Thieves above him, but for me, this really should be the best team in Academy. Again, they really did nothing but I don't want to say get better, because Bradley versus Jenkins for sure is going to be better right now, but Bradley, upside-wise, I think really could be one of the more interesting top lane prospects we have in all of North America. So it'll be interesting, another year of development for players like Yeon, Ayla, and Hyeri. This team should be really good. They are my favorites to win Proving Grounds and Academy and all that stuff. I really, really like what TL did this offseason. All right, and that is going to do it. We have done it. We have power ranked all 10 Academy teams by how strong I think they will be going into spring. Like I said at the beginning, this is probably going to be the most volatile video in terms of the power rankings, just because these players are designed to change. That is the point of Academy, is that these players will grow throughout the year. We'll kind of get a better idea of the players that are more ready right now, and, you know, some players that maybe will be there in the future, but just aren't there yet. If you guys enjoyed, please go ahead and leave a like. Right now, up on your screen, you're going to be seeing a list of where I power ranked all the players in terms of their positions, and transitioning over right now will be how I power rank the teams, 1 to 10, as well as what I could find for a consensus ranking from 1 to 10. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed, please leave a like, comment on how you disagree with me. Obviously, I love having conversations with you guys in the comments section below, so if you guys have vastly different opinions on some of these players, I'd love to hear it. Obviously, you know, this stuff isn't a science, we're all watching the same game, so you know, it's always fun to have conversations with you guys about that kind of stuff. But I hope you all are having a good day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.